In this video, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to rendering software. And as I discussed in the book, there's a lot of different software out there. Some are easier to use, more one-click operations. Some are very detailed, and you can have control over all kinds of parameters. Make sure you get the one that suits your needs best. And what I want to do right here is just use an example, basically use the Twilight software to show you all the different components of rendering software that they all pretty much more or less have, and that you can use in the respective way. So first of all, there's some kind of a render dialog, of course. This is where I can just start a render, and I can just preview everything and see the final output, and I can save the file and so on and so forth. Two things to keep in mind. One is the type of rendering that is being used in terms of quality presets. There's, if I click here on advanced, for example, there's ambient occlusion, there's depth renders. There's all kinds of different ways that you can render a scene. There's a progressive kind of render which just keeps adding pixels and then gets better the longer you let it run, and so on and so forth. So there's all kinds of different presets that you can use. Typically it makes sense to always start the first render with a low preset and then make your way up, because the higher up you go in terms of quality, the longer it will take, the more resources it will use. Size is another thing. You want to start small in terms of pixels typically, and then rather work your way up, because again, every single pixel in this picture has to be rendered, and that's part of that. So then there are some other options right here. There's actually, this one has a post-process option where you can add a vignette like this, or some light bloom, those kind of things. So that is very much dependent on your rendering software, whether it comes with it, but typically quality and size is something that they all do in their rendering dialog. Then next window here is the environment. Typically there's a bunch of different environments that you can use, and I'm going to do physical sky right now just so that you can see it. Physical sky gives you a sky with haziness at the ends that is based on the time and date that's set in SketchUp. And so then, of course, if you have a morning light or afternoon light, it gets the nice, beautiful color. But it's literally a physical sky. You can use a color as a background. Sometimes it makes sense to, let's say we do gray or something. That gives you not the sky as a background, but a very uniform kind of studio setup with these uniform shadows below. So that's often a preferred option for that. So in my case, I actually had it all the way down to black because I didn't want anything in the background, and that's why this comes up as a start. In different software, you can enable the sun and have a bunch of parameters with this. In my case here, this is supposed to be just a studio setup where I want to evaluate lights, so I actually don't want the sun. So for any kind of interior rendering, you want to turn the sun off actually. And this might just be automatically turned off once you turn shadows off in SketchUp, but in this particular one you have a little more control over whether the sun is on or not. Next is lights, where you can do two things. You can place lights and you can edit them. Now in my case here, I'm just going to click right there, and I place the light. In this case it's a point light, and I can already edit some properties. You can also go in and edit properties for other lights if you want to. So this is typically, I should leave it on. This is typically where you can turn lights on, turn lights off, make shadows enabled, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you only want lights to light a part of your model, but rather not generate any shadows. So that's a possibility here. Anyways, so lights are, of course, a big thing for rendering software, and you can do point lights, you can do spotlights, you can do IES lights, and all kinds of other stuff. Next is materials. For materials, you can often work with SketchUp's materials, and rendering software will typically take parameters from SketchUp. So in this case, the color parameter came in from SketchUp, and if it had any kind of transparency, it would also have come in from SketchUp like this. But the nice thing with rendering software is, of course, you can go a little further. You can make it colored glass. You can make it reflective. And the architectural glass, I can actually switch it to mirror, which means, of course, it looks really cool like that now. And so all of these material options come in this way, and often there are very simple options, whether you want it reflective or non-reflective, and then some other software like this one here basically gives you some kind of reference. Satin-looking wood would be one reference, car paint, all kinds of different, or stone, plastic, and so on and so forth. So all of these material options you would apply in a material dialog, and the details are a little discussed in the book, but you can see here already things like shininess and whether it actually reflects lights or refracts lights and so on and so forth. That all gets set in here, and often the defaults are great, and then just by tweaking it a little bit you can adapt it to your needs. So that's the materials dialog, and then depending on the rendering software, this one here is a scene view kind of thing, but there's often some other options that help you with utilities, but the principal dialogs are the same as I showed you here. There's a render dialog where you run your render. You have control over environment settings. You have control over lights, and you can place lights. And you can modify and adjust materials so that you're happy with your scene right here. Alrighty.